Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. We have a doozy of a story today. We know what's going on right now in America is the big G word. That G word is gentrification, but it comes with a whole lot of appendages as well. I have two of the best out of Atlanta right now that will be discussing gentrification, but we're going to go a little bit deeper than gentrification because you know what? Gentrification is but a symptom of something that is much greater. So I want to thank Robby Caban for introducing us to this particular topic with Mr. Kamau. So Robby, why don't you bring us in and tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then we're going to move on from there.
Well, my name is Robby. I've been on your show before, Egberto. With much gratitude. I am a licensed agent in Atlanta, Georgia, and as a licensed agent, I have access to systems and information. I hope and I strive to be a responsible agent. As an agent, we're supposed to build communities in a healthy, prosperous way. And I came across the fellow who is on with us today. I'm very grateful about this, Mr. Kamau Franklin. He is in ground zero for gentrification in Atlanta, in Pittsburgh, the heart of Pittsburgh. He's going to give some background on the community of Pittsburgh and why it's so special. It's almost like the South Bronx to me, where I grew up. But really, in terms of Kamau and gentrification in Atlanta, there's so many people who are thriving off of what's happening and making profit off of what's happening. And the difference that I see with the community movement builders and Kamau, people have asked me about this, is that they're sincere in who they want to help, who they want to support, who they want to empower, which is the long-term residents of Pittsburgh. And I believe that there's an honesty here in this organization that I'm very grateful that you're showcasing. Come out.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate being on. So background, my name is Kamau Franklin. I'm a longtime community organizer, originally from New York, also formerly a practicing attorney. I started community movement builders in Atlanta, but we now have chapters in Detroit and in Dallas and soon to be San Diego. Our main function as an organizing group is to fight against gentrification in Southwest Atlanta, particularly in a neighborhood that's known as Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is a historically Black community. It was started in 1883 or created in 1883 by formerly enslaved Africans who settled that area to actually escape from white supremacy violence that was happening in other places and other areas of Atlanta. So this community was settled by a black population. It's been a working class and middle class Black population for the last 100 and so years. And now it's being threatened by the issue of gentrification, i.e. folks who are higher income white seeing and targeting a neighborhood, developers, real estate developers, city elected officials targeting a particular area for higher priced properties that move out communities that have been there again, for literally hundreds of years. And the thing about this gentrification problem is that it's not just Atlanta, it's happening everywhere across the country. So where I'm originally from, Brooklyn, New York, it's happening there. It's happening in Oakland. It's happening in what's left of any Black community or brown community in San Francisco. So it's happening across the country. I think there's particulars about Atlanta that speak to why it's happening there, but I think there's a general format about how this gentrification takes place across the country that we should discuss more.
Now, you said that you think there's some specific causality. I want to jump into that right away. Tell me what you think.
Well, I think some of the causality, particularly as it comes to Atlanta, is that you've got a Black professional and Black political elite mainly that is teamed up with a white economic elite to decide how development gets done in Atlanta. And that development is for the furtherance of corporations, big business, rich people, upper middle class people at the expense of poor people, working class people, i.e. mostly Black people in Atlanta. So I think although Atlanta has this reputation of being the Black Mecca, which is something that's publicized again by elected officials and well-off Black people, on the ground, what you see is a city that has some of the worst income disparity rates in the country, worst social mobility rates across the country, and a city that was once well over 59, 60, 61% Black, that is now barely 50 to 51% Black. And this has all happened under the leadership control, again, of Black elected officials, Democratic Black elected officials who purport themselves to be progressives and liberals, but who really side with bigger investors and developers to decide how development happens on the ground. So I think that some of that is unique to Atlanta. But again, most of the major cities where there are large Black populations, what you have is liberal Democratic leadership who are great on national progressive issues, but can't seem to get beyond the idea of saying no to big developers, no big stadiums, no big box stores. Instead, they say yes, yes, yes to every tax break that these folks want. And they spur this gentrification from happening and then claim that it's a big surprise when there's no low income housing or even moderate income housing for people to live in.
That is amazing. I mean, I find it. You brought up the thing about liberal progressives, etc. I've already found in many of the activities that I'm in throughout the country that many times the elite liberals and the elite progressives are no different than the other side that we talk about. And in fact, what I've spoken about many a times is the establishment being one and in the same, whether it's a Republican establishment or a Democratic establishment. Now, Robby, there's one thing interesting, and that is I've kind of given you your own moniker. I've called you the activist agent, the activist real estate agent, because a lot of these stories that you bring into the fold are things that, it's generally taboo for a real estate agent to talk about or to bring into the fold. I mean, you brought some stories with respect to the person who created the studio. I forgot his name now. Yes. Okay, and you brought his story to the fold. Tell us a little bit about how that ties into what Kamau is talking about.
Well, I mean, I apologize because I literally listened to Kamau and I felt like an overwhelming emotion just in listening to him. And I think that that's some of why this is so hard for people to get involved in, because it's very, very difficult. It's very heavy if you really contemplate what's happening to people. One, I want to acknowledge everything Kamau said is accurate. I'm a witness to it. I have lived in this community for over a decade. I'm from the South Bronx, and it's particularly unusual in Atlanta, where it actually happened in the South Bronx as I was growing up. But it's really unusual in Atlanta. It's very confusing because we have Black leadership, in the city. And so that throws a whole nother dynamic that it's difficult for people to process, because who you think you can trust is confusing. It is. It's very confusing, and it's really honestly heartbreaking, to be plain about it, because you want to form an alliance and you want to think the best of people, no matter who they are. But even the nicest of people, and I say that in quotations, because the systemic consequences is not about niceties. It's about the the systems that are at work that people engage in ignorantly. And I use that word as best as I can, but he's 100% accurate. It is a huge mistake to the taxpayers of Atlanta. I'm a real estate agent. We are whitewashing these communities that is doing nothing for the tax base. It's a short-term vision. If we didn't do what we're doing now, we would actually be more lucrative on a global scale. We don't have to do this at all. It's a mistake. It's a huge mistake. And we are paying quadruple, 5 times in later consequences in terms of affordability, subsidizing developers, a homelessness crisis, the rise in crime and gentrification. I mean, literally, the down payment assistance programs. This is all avoidable. It almost seems like, to come out, the city elected officials think that the only way traditional planning is to monetize on residential housing to generate tax revenue. And that is not so. We can generate tax revenue from commercial real estate, and that's literally non-existent. And the formula to do that in divested areas is very different in planning. But the problem is that the people in planning and the people who planning listens to know nothing about divested areas. And in Atlanta in particular, with the system that we have with the former Mayor Jackson, Our former mayor, relatives live very, very well today, which is very confusing for white people when we discuss reparations. His vision on the NPU system, the neighborhood planning unit, was to have true community engagement. But that system that he envisioned and created, similarly to MLK, has been, forgive me, bastardized. It's been, jeopardized. It's been compromised. And it's been compromised at the basic level by allowing these monetary groups to be charged at the neighborhood association level, which that agenda trickles to the NPU level, which goes to planning, which goes to City Hall, which becomes our policy. And, to your point, Egberto, and I'm tying this all together as a movement, we have covenants, we have a whole ethics proclamation and so on that we're supposed to follow to build communities. I'm not supposed to personally benefit from having a license and access to these systems. I'm supposed to help the general public and have an integrity in my work. And I equate it to, MLK's work when, the late Dr. King was talking about America and America holding up to the truth that we claim and being honest about it. If all men are created equal, then that should reflect in our systems. And when we talk about agents, and ethics and agents building communities, that I'm not here to, make money for myself. I'm here to help build equity for everyone and help correct things that are not, doing that. And that's why I'm in alliance and supportive.
Let me say something, because I want to unpack something that you said. I mean, because a lot of these issues, we bring race into it. We bring all these different things into it. And what I think there's something that we preach on Politics Done Right, mostly that it's really, in fact, I have a book called As I See It, Class. Where is it? As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom. Because race is a tool to allow a few to get rich. And you've alluded to reparations, and people see Maynard Jackson and how his family lives, and they say, what about reparations? What about gentrification? Why is all these things harmful? Look at how Kamau is living. Look at how these other folks are living. They don't quite understand that, in effect, race is just a tool to be able to, a tool of an underclass right now to be able to take things away with folks who are not going to go into the courthouse to fight for it, or don't have anybody on their side. And of course, Kamau, I guess you're the person, or yours are the organization that has the side of the people who need it.
Yeah, I mean, what we do in Southwest Atlanta, and we do in some of the other places where we have chapters, is that we try to organize on the ground, particularly with Black communities, to help support them in their fight to save their communities. Our role is to bring tactical support, to bring some resources to bear, to bring strategies that we've tried in the past. But really what we're trying to do is to help support that community as it organizes against the wave of gentrification. And you're right. I mean, these communities are, for the most part, poor Black and brown communities that don't have access to the resources that other communities do, particularly a development class, a political class that makes decisions day after day, passes resolutions, laws, codes, and so forth, and everybody else is playing catch up. So we have to be there on the ground to provide some of the research necessary so that we can catch up before they get to do what they want to do. So a lot of these elected officials, even the ones who believe that they are progressive or they came into office to do good things, they fastly fall into the dangerous channel of working with folks who have means, right, who have resources, who bring them into parties and meetings and boardrooms that they themselves have never been in before, and they get seduced by that. And so they get seduced by the language of what's considered success in America, which is establishing a big business. And anything shiny and big seems to be the very meaning of success, as opposed to a working class community doesn't need a brand new stadium to make it better, right? It may need a cooperative grocery store, right? It may need obviously better schools. It needs parks which are accessible for those folks but not necessarily dog parks, which are meant for other people to come in and be a trailblazer for other groups to come in. It doesn't need fancy coffee shops. It may need cleaners. It may need bodegas. It may need other stores that are accessible and what the community actually wants. So if folks were interested in providing these things or finding channels to do these things, they could. They could go to do things like cooperative housing or land trust. Cooperative grocery stores or land trust housing, which would bring down the value of residential housing and make it permanently affordable for people. But instead, they go to the highest bidder. They believe that whatever developers say that they're going to do to transform a neighborhood is going to be good for that neighborhood. But transforming a neighborhood that moves the original group out of that neighborhood and moves in new people is not making that neighborhood better. It's basically ethnic cleansing.
I mean, what you are saying is so prescient. Let me tell you a little quick story. There's one particular program I had about our economic system being a fraud on most people. And I got really hit for that. And then they said, look at downtown Houston, Texas, one of the most beautiful skylines there is. I mean, it's beautiful, tall buildings, great freeways, everything. And my next question to the person that converted him on the instant was, and how much of that can you use? How much of that can you enter? And you've just made a present point when you said instead of building bodegas and maybe a washateria in close proximity, maybe a grocery store that's economical, we bring a high-priced coffee shop, and in gentrifying and increasing the prices, the people that are there, wow, the neighborhood looks great, but nobody that's originally there can do a damn thing with it. Mm-hmm. What's the point then? And that is the hardest thing that we have to teach people where it comes to gentrification. Somebody rides into that new town and said, but look how it has changed. Look how beautiful it looks. And then you say, well, the people that were there can't use any of it, or they're no longer there. Now, Robbie, you took me through we do all these video things, and Robbie is a great activist real estate person with her camera doing things real time. You took us through a neighborhood. And I'm going to tell you, we didn't talk about this when you did that tape, but the striking thing to me was all the people that you were talking to, they were resolved to what was happening, and they seemed to have no fight. My expectation is that what Kamau is doing is going to put some fight into them, but is that what you normally see throughout?
No, and that's a reason why I'm very, very grateful that you provided this opportunity and that Kamau made the time to come on and discuss his work, his organization's work, because they have really put their, for lack of a better word, money where their mouth is. They have purchased, they've purchased property in Pittsburgh. They have yes, they have their headquarters in Pittsburgh. Kamau's organization is rooted in Pittsburgh. He has open houses that are open to the public, and that's huge because the communities that have moved in, that have kind of taken over, it's almost like a mini war happening right now in Southwest Atlanta. And these people are quote unquote well-intentioned, and God forgive me for saying they're ignorant beyond. And so they have the best intentions, but their actions are horrific. Like their collective actions are just horrific. Like even the charging of monetary dues. So the people who are long-term residents, they're not online sometimes. They're going. The fact that Kamau even had an open forum and that people could show up and listen in real time and it wasn't online was huge. The fact that there's actually a land that has a farm on it, a community garden that people can see, and that there's a mural on the wall with Black faces is huge. Because these people that have moved in, they have a skill set, they're coming from generational wealth off of real estate, using Nextdoor, using programs like Slack, using their connections, using their resources at jobs. And that is not available to the long-term residents at all. So it is not an equitable playing field at all. And the long-term residents often become completely attacked and ostracized on these platforms that have huge money behind them, like Nextdoor and Facebook. And no one's regulating it.
Wow. Well, let me tell you, because what I want to do first of all is lift what you are doing up in whatever channels we have. So what I'd like to ask you, Kamau, is tell us a little bit about the foundation of your organization, who your organization is, how people can reach it. Is it a 501c3 that can take donations, that sort of thing? And how can you be connected not to 3 or 4 cities, but to cities throughout the country that's getting gentrified?
Yeah. So again, the name of our organization is called Community Movement Builders. Our website is communitymovementbuilders.org. We have a Facebook page by the same name, a Twitter account, and Instagram by the same name. We are a 501c3 organization. So yes, we accept donations. It's our lifeblood, of course. We have dues. We have some small grants. And I want to thank Robbie and you for allowing me to be on this platform, because one of the things that we need to make sure that people do see the work that we do is that visibility. Because again, we are a small resource organization, but what we've done with those resources, as Robbie mentioned, is that we purchased a house in the neighborhood that we wanted to work in, where we provide a childcare co-op space for a childcare cooperative, office space for another organization that does grassroots organizing to work out of. We provide housing for an urban farmer who, in exchange for low rent, works on our urban garden, which is right next door to us. We actually have a plot right across the street that we're also going to garden on until we raise enough resources to build a second house on. We have a community stabilization fund in which we give grants to people in the neighborhood to help them with their mortgages, with their rents, with utility bills, with code violations. And we do that organizing work where we have petitions, yard signs that are saying stop gentrification. And all of that is to do the policy work necessary to organize folks to get out into the street and challenge their elected officials, challenge the policies, create alternative institutions so that we can figure out ways to fight to have control over that neighborhood. So one of the things that's really important that people don't like to talk about is that there has to be a level of political education that so people feel like they can fight for their communities, that they actually feel like they do have some ownership and they're not just visitors in the places that they live, or that they can't just be pushed out in a moment's notice. They have to believe that they have some ownership rights, some interest, and believe that they have the opportunities to fight for that. And so I think it's groups like ours that try to be on the ground to push that work forward. And so, it's great for us. And I agree, we want to start chapters all across the country. We want to be a movement that fights against gentrification, that fights for Black sustainability, that fights for community organizing, that fights for our rights to be a group that can have some collective ownership of wealth to protect our interests. And that's why we built our organization.
Come out, there are so many organizations out there that elitist organization, I call them, and I really have to do that they talk a good talk, but they're not working with the people. You would not imagine how impressed I am that we have a group that I've been introduced to, a group that's on the ground, that's making a difference personally with different people within the community. So thank you for what you do. And Robbie, I'd like to ask you to bring us on home. First of all, I want to thank you for bringing Kamau into the fold, into the Politics Done Right fold, because like I said, I'm impressed beyond being impressed. So thank you for bringing Kamau and his organization to the fold. So bring us home.
I just want to say that Kamau and his organization are one of the few people that, what we reviewed, even just having a home base in Pittsburgh, the mural is beautiful, the community garden is beautiful. He has had open forums, and he's one of the few leaders that have openly and publicly said we need to challenge the current elected officials who are not serving the public. Nobody says that. Nobody says that. And I've been around for over a decade. And so I had to ask you, Egberto, and I had to be grateful that he's here, and I had to be thankful because the people in Pittsburgh deserve it. And what's happening, to those people throughout Southwest Atlanta, throughout the South Side, throughout the country, is a disservice and an injustice to us all. We all have an ancestry, and we're all kind of tied together. It doesn't take anything, and I guess that's what I want to focus on, what I want to say in terms of, it doesn't take anything from us who may not be classified as Black to support Black empowerment. We actually are doing harm to us all by not supporting it. And so let's get there. Let's get beyond there, and let's get together and do the work. Let's support these organizations. That's what we need to do.
Kamau Franklin and Robby Caban, thank you so kindly for having been part of Politics Done Right. And till we meet again, which we are sure to do in the very near future, you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so kindly.
Thank you so much.